Imagine the sheer devastation a hurricane leaves behind: homes ripped apart, businesses shattered, crucial infrastructure, just crumbling. The immediate human instinct is to rebuild, to strengthen, to protect, right? To create a more resilient community, especially when faced with, well, the increasing intensity of these storms. But what if, right in the heart of that urgent recovery, a sweeping new state law suddenly ties the hands of your local officials, stripping them of the power to make critical decisions about their own community's future growth and safety? It's a scenario playing out right now across Florida. Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into Florida Senate Bill 180, or SB 180. Now, on the surface, this legislation was presented and passed, really, as an emergency measure. It was designed to streamline disaster recovery, offer crucial relief to hurricane victims. But as we peel back the layers, as we explore our sources, a far more complex, contentious, and frankly deeply concerning story emerges. It's one that delves into the delicate balance of local government power, the undeniable and, let's be honest, often shadowy influence of development interests, and the very bedrock principle of home rule here in the Sunshine State. It's truly a political storm brewing in Florida, threatening to reshape how communities respond to disasters and, crucially, plan for their future.
Indeed. And for this deep dive, we've meticulously gathered insights from a really diverse array of sources. This includes critical local news reporting from outlets like the West Volusia Beacon, Flagler Live, Your Observer, places really on the ground.
Yeah.
Alongside that, we have rigorous legal analyses from respected firms like Weiss, Sirota, Helfman, Cole, plus Bierman, and expert commentary from environmental and planning advocacy groups, think 1,000 Friends of Florida. Our mission here is to go beyond just reporting the facts. We really aim to help you, our listener, understand not just what SB 180 says in its, legislative text, but what it means for Florida's vibrant communities, its residents, and that fundamental balance of local decision-making power that's long been, well, a hallmark of governance here.
And the timeliness of this deep dive couldn't be more acute. It's resonating with real-time events happening right now. We're recording this on August 22nd, 2025. And this isn't just some theoretical debate playing out in legislative halls, not at all. Local governments across Florida are actively grappling with the profound fallout from this law right now. Just yesterday, August 21st, the Volusia County Council was formally recommending changes to the law, pushing back against its broad provisions. And even more defiantly, the city of Deltona just voted, that was August 18th, to actually sue the state over SB 180. That signals a growing legal battle.
A big step.
A huge step, and the pressure is palpable in places like Manatee County, too. Officials there are debating their next steps, having already postponed a critical vote on crucial wetland protections just this week, August 19th. Why? Because of direct threats and the chilling effect imposed by this very bill. It's all happening in real time. Communities are on the front lines, feeling the immediate impact. So let's trace the story from its beginning, the genesis of SB 180. Our sources reveal that this bill initially moved through both houses of the Florida legislature with what honestly can only be described as little attention and almost no dissent. That's a quote we're seeing. It was initially pitched, to lawmakers and the public as an emergency bill, designed specifically to help hurricane victims quickly rebuild, get their lives back on track.
A noble cause, seemingly.
Exactly. Seems straightforward. Yet, almost immediately after its passage and signing, it quickly transformed. It went from this seemingly innocuous disaster relief measure into a, quote, lightning rod among local officials, igniting widespread concern. Flagler Live really drove this point home in their reporting. They stated, quite controversially, that the bill was passed on the pretext of providing emergency help for hurricane victims, but, and this is a critical phrase that really captures the sentiment, it contained a poison pill benefiting no one but big developers.
Strong words.
Very strong. And the bill's sponsor, as recorded in legislative documents, was Senator Nick Deisley from Indian Rock Speech.
What's truly fascinating here, and concerning, is that SB 180 didn't just emerge in a vacuum. It didn't appear out of thin air. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises a really important question. Is this an isolated legislative effort? Or is it part of a larger, more calculated, and you could argue systematic trend, a trend to centralize power and reduce local control? Our sources strongly suggest it's the latter. They indicate a clear and escalating pattern of similar legislation that, in many ways, kind of served as a warm-up for SB 180's ultimately expansive and statewide reach.
Like precursors.
Exactly. Consider this historical progression. Following the devastation of Hurricane Ian back in early 2023, for instance. Senator Jonathan Martin of Fort Myers sponsored a bill that specifically restricted new development rules, but only within a 100-square-mile radius around the impacted area. This earlier piece of legislation, it was explicitly framed around private property rights. In fact, a Florida House member, Bob Rommel, made a very clear statement about it, saying, "There's nothing more important than protecting private property rights."
Okay, so framing it around property rights.
Right. And that initial bill, it was designed with a sunset clause. It was set to expire in 2024. However, after Hurricane Idalia ravaged the Big Bend area, a special legislative session was convened in November 2023. During that session, Representative Jason Schoaf of Port St. Joe sponsored a bill that not only extended this ban on, quote, common sense regulation changes through 2026, but significantly expanded the affected area to 10 specific counties. We're talking Charlotte, Collier, DeSoto, Glades, Hardy, Hendry, Highlands, Lee, Manatee, and Sarasota.
So it grew significantly.
It grew significantly. So what we observe is this progression. Initially, localized, temporary measures presented as specific relief for storm-affected zones. These effectively laid the groundwork. They tested the legal and political waters, you could say. And that paved the way for the far broader, statewide, and much more expansive preemption we now see codified in SB 180. This wasn't just a bill. You could almost see it as a legislative Trojan horse with a clear pattern of increasing state control over local land use decisions.
And the way this thing navigated the legislative process, that itself raises even more pointed questions. Questions about transparency, about democratic accountability. As you noted, it initially passed with little attention and almost no dissent during the regular session. But there are serious allegations, detailed in several reports, that a critical provision, the very heart of this controversy was, quote, snuck into the law on the absolute last day of debate.
The last day.
The last day. And adding fuel to this fire, some lawmakers reportedly admitted they weren't aware of the provision when they voted for the whole bill. That suggests a real lack of proper scrutiny.
Wow.
This brings us to a concept highlighted by Larry Arnold. He's a longtime resident of Manatee County with extensive experience in Florida City and county management in a Facebook post he made. He introduces the term log rolling. He defines it as a legislative practice where, quote, unrelated matters are combined in a single bill, often tucking small, more controversial elements into a larger bill that is seen as essential to pass.
Hiding things in plain sight, basically.
Pretty much. And he argues quite forcefully that this practice is a potential violation of the Florida Constitution, specifically Article 3, Section 6. Now, this article explicitly requires that every law shall embrace but one subject and matter properly connected therewith, and its subject should be briefly expressed in the title.
Right. The single subject rule.
Exactly. And that constitutional mandate, it isn't just bureaucratic red tape. It's designed to give both lawmakers and, crucially, the public reasonable and transparent notice about what's actually inside a bill. It's meant to prevent precisely these kinds of last-minute hidden additions that can have profound, unforeseen consequences for everyone.
And to compound the issue, host, to really underscore the boldness of this legislative maneuver, the bill, signed into law June 26, 2025, it includes a particularly contentious detail. Its limits on local authority are actually retroactive, back to August 1st, 2024.
Retroactive, that's unusual.
Highly unusual. And think about the implications. It means local actions, local ordinances, local decisions, things carefully debated and enacted by elected officials nearly a year before the bill even became law, could now be deemed invalid, nullified, wiped away.
That just fundamentally undermines the principle of established law, doesn't it? It creates huge instability.
Immense instability. And what started as a bill supposedly for specific hurricane victims now has this unprecedented geographic reach. The law explicitly states it covers every part of the state, not just the ones clobbered by the two storms. It specifically names hurricanes Debbie, Helene, and Milton from 2024 within Section 28.
So even if you didn't get hit.
Exactly. Senior Volusia County Attorney Paulo Soria, he explained the sweeping nature of this really clearly. He noted that the state's preemption, its power to override local authority, applies to counties within 100 miles of the track of a hurricane declared by the National Hurricane Center. He then observed, quote, when you layer all three hurricanes together, that's the entire state, basically. The entire state is kind of like super preemption for more burdensome and restrictive regulations.
So basically, the whole state is under this regime now.
The whole state. Even if your county saw blue skies during those storms, its future development decisions are now tied to this state law, designed for hurricane recovery elsewhere, and for years to come.
How long did it last?
The law stretches on to October 2027. And if another hurricane hits before then, the no regulation time clock starts all over again, potentially extending this preemption indefinitely. This broad retroactive application, regardless of whether an area actually sustained damage, that's a major flashpoint. It's a core point of contention, and it really reveals what looks like a sophisticated strategy to introduce controversial measures under the radar and retroactively invalidate local decisions.
Now, this is precisely where local communities are feeling the deepest impact, where the rubber truly meets the road for local decision-making. Our sources pinpoint two specific sections of SB 180. Remember, it's a 30-section bill, but two sections are causing this massive stir, fueling the rebellion we're seeing. First, there's Section 18. The section explicitly bans a moratorium on construction, reconstruction, or redevelopment of any property within a designated disaster zone. But it doesn't stop there. It also broadly prohibits changes in local comprehensive plans and land development codes.
So freezing local planning in place.
Exactly. And what's critical to understand is the sheer breadth of this ban. It's not just about stopping new, maybe speculative construction. It directly impacts vital post-disaster activities like reconstruction and redevelopment. Things absolutely essential for communities to literally rebuild their lives, their homes, their infrastructure after a storm. This provision can handcuff local governments from making necessary, immediate adjustments, maybe to building codes, maybe to zoning based on lessons learned from a disaster. Then we move to Section 28, and this delivers an even more potent, legally significant blow. It declares any such moratorium or restrictive or burdensome comprehensive plan amendment, land development regulation, or procedure shall be null and void ab initio.
And that Latin phrase, ab initio, it's incredibly important. It means from the beginning. So any local measure deemed to violate SB 180 isn't just stopped in its tracks. It's treated as if it never existed in the first place.
Wiped off the books.
Retroactively invalidated. Erased from the legal record as if it were never passed. Now, senior Volusia County Attorney Paolo Soria, he summarized the state's stated intent behind this, saying it means, quote, don't put more kind of burdensome regulations on people who have properties that are damaged by a hurricane.
Okay, that sounds reasonable on its face. Helping storm victims.
It does.
Okay.
But as we've already discussed, the practical application goes far beyond just damaged properties. It covers the entire state. This creates an immediate, immense challenge for local governments genuinely trying to manage their specific, unique local growth and recovery needs, especially in, vulnerable coastal areas.
Yeah.
Which brings us to that key question. What exactly constitutes more restrictive or burdensome?
Right, who decides?
Exactly. This vague, undefined language isn't just an inconvenience, it's a legal minefield. It's precisely what creates such significant challenges, such uncertainty for local governments. It leaves them vulnerable to legal challenges and effectively paralyzes proactive planning.
Exactly. The lack of a clear, concrete definition for more restrictive or burdensome is a huge, paralyzing problem for local officials. It means that local governments may be genuinely trying to protect their residents with updated flood zones or stronger building codes in vulnerable areas, or even new environmental protections like tree ordinances to combat urban heat islands or preserve natural drainage. They now operate under this constant looming threat. Any new protective measure they propose could be challenged by a developer as burdensome.
Even if it makes the community safer.
Even if it makes them safer. It forces cities to defend costly lawsuits simply for trying to do their job and adapt to evolving community needs and environmental realities. Manatee County Commission Chairman George Cruz, he articulated this profound concern perfectly. He said, quote, plus the bill is super vague about what more restrictive and burdensome means. And attorney Jamie Cole, whose firm is representing municipalities challenging the law, he echoed this. He noted that Senate Bill 180 significantly limits the authority of local governments to adopt land use regulations considered more restrictive or burdensome than current laws. This deliberate ambiguity, it essentially acts as a powerful, chilling deterrent. It forces local governments to second-guess any attempt to update or strengthen their land use regulations, leaving them exposed and their communities potentially more vulnerable.
And this ambiguity, it directly feeds into what that Flagler Live article bluntly, controversially calls the poison pill benefiting no one but big developers. Because the law includes a very specific and impactful mechanism that massively empowers external interests. It basically gives them a significant legal hammer. It states that anyone, not just affected parties, can serve a local government with notification of intent to sue if they think the local government has violated the law.
Anyone, not just someone who lives there or owns property.
Anyone. That's a critical detail. It means a developer from another county, maybe even another state entirely, with no direct connection to a local community. They could challenge an ordinance they simply don't like, maybe because it affects their potential profits down the line. Furthermore, if the local government refuses to, quote, correct any problem, as defined by the challenger, mind you, within just 14 days, a full-blown lawsuit can proceed.
14 days. That's incredibly fast for government action. Incredibly tight. It creates immense pressure and significant financial risk for local authorities, who often operate with limited legal staff and resources. The law firm WSHC plus B pointed out the severe financial threat here. They note that municipalities face up to $250,000 in legal fees if unsuccessful in defending against these challenges.
$250,000. That's a huge deterrent.
It's a substantial financial disincentive. It makes local governments understandably wary of resisting, effectively silencing them in some cases. We even have a concrete, real-world example from Deltona. Commissioner Dory Howington highlighted that even the idea of raising development impact fees, which Deltona hasn't done in a decade, meaning they're significantly out of date, is being interpreted as a potential violation of SB 180.
So they can't even raise fees to pay for the impacts of new development.
That's the concern. It further handcuffs local financing for crucial infrastructure and services. This provision, it just shifts the power dynamic dramatically, giving developers a disproportionate amount of leverage. Okay, so the stage is set then. A dramatic showdown is brewing. With local officials feeling this immense pressure, this financial sword of Damocles hanging over them, it's really no surprise that a rebellion has started to brew across the state, as Flagler Live, Bryant. Local governments are not just quietly accepting this. Many are actively pushing back. Let's start with Volusia County. After weeks of hearing and voicing complaints from residents, from local leaders, the Volusia County Council is formally recommending changes in the law.
Okay, what kind of changes?
Their specific proposal, drafted by county legal staff, aims to clarify the language. They want the preemption to apply to only properties damaged by a hurricane, rather than these sweeping, often statewide, disaster-declared areas.
More targeted. Makes sense.
Seems reasonable. County Council member David Santiago, he's a former state representative, he's taking a pragmatic approach. He's calling it a reasonable request to send to the legislature and instructing their lobbyists to work towards amending the bill. But, there's inherent uncertainty about when or even if any changes might actually be considered by the legislature. There's a glimmer of cautious optimism. Rep. Richard Gentry said he's heard rumors that the legislature will look at some fixes. And Rep. Chase Tremont acknowledged that no bill is perfect, but every bill is a perfect starting point, and he's willing to listen.
But rumors and willingness aren't commitments.
Exactly. They're far from firm commitments at this point, leaving many local leaders anxious about what the next legislative session might actually bring or not bring.
And that urgency for action, host, it's very real in many communities. Waiting for Tallahassee to possibly act. For the city of Deltona, that was simply not an option.
And this is precisely where we see a truly bold act of defiance. A real underdog story unfolding right now. Despite those cautionary calls to wait, the city of Deltona decided to draw a decisive line in the sand. They took a much more direct, confrontational stand against SB 180. They are, quite courageously, standing by the moratorium on new residential development that they enacted back on June 30th. That was just 4 days after Governor DeSantis signed SB 180 into law.
So direct defiance.
Direct defiance. This moratorium, it was put in place to manage rapid growth, infrastructure strain. Now it's directly at odds with the state bill. Then, on August 18th, 2025, in a highly anticipated, very charged meeting, the Deltona City Commission voted 4 to 3 to sue the state to nullify SB 180. They plan to join a larger statewide coalition of aggrieved municipalities.
The coalition is forming.
It is. Commissioner Dory Howington's statement during that meeting was particularly powerful, very resolute. She said, quote, "We can't afford to wait until next year. This is our moment. We need to take it." Deltona City Attorney Zach Good, he explained the financial commitment for this audacious legal move. It's $10,000 at the trial level, an additional $5,000 for the district appeal, and another $5,000 for the Florida Supreme Court. These costs are subject to participation by at least 10 local governments, so they're trying to spread the burden.
Strengthen numbers.
Exactly. And Deltona isn't alone. Edgewater City Council also voted on the same evening to maintain its building moratorium and join this growing coalition. It shows a unified front emerging. Of course, there was dissent within Deltona's commission. Commissioner Emma Santiago expressed concern about too many negative impacts for our city, preferring a legislative amendment strategy, fearing the costs, the potential backlash of a lawsuit. But Commissioner Avila Vasquez offered a clear counterargument, a compelling rationale for immediate action. She said, "All that we're asking is time to fix our problems," indicating that waiting for a legislative session next year just isn't viable for their rapidly growing, infrastructurally strained community. This is local democracy pushing back, plain and simple.
In this specific situation, where a popular local initiative gets overridden by state law, it raises that important question again. What does it truly mean for local democracy? What happens when a clearly expressed popular will, backed by citizen engagement, is just summarily dismissed by state action? Orange County provides an incredibly stark, incredibly frustrating example.
The Vision 2050 plan.
Yes, exactly. For 8 meticulous years, they worked on crafting Vision 2050, this comprehensive growth plan designed to guide the county's future. This plan, it was incredibly popular, deeply aligned with community sentiment, so much so that 73% of all voters said yes to its rural boundary in November of last year. That a clear mandate from the electorate.
73%. That's huge.
It's huge. Yet, in a move that just sent shockwaves through the county, the Florida Department of Commerce, citing SB 180, declared Vision 2050 null and void ab initio, effectively erasing years of planning, public input, and a direct popular vote. Just gone.
Unbelievable.
And the challenges didn't stop there. A Texas-based developer behind the proposed 2,000-home Sustani project, a major development, promptly filed a lawsuit against Orange County.
Right.
They directly leveraged SB 180 as their legal justification to overturn the locally approved growth plan and its protective rural boundary.
So the law immediately gets used against the county's plan.
Immediately. Orange County Commissioner Kelly Martinez-Semrad articulated the deep frustration, the sense of betrayal this creates. She stated unequivocally that SB 180, quote, is giving special interests a veto power over what the voters decided. In direct response to this perceived disenfranchisement, the Orange County Commissioners announced their firm intention to join that growing group of local governments suing to overturn this profoundly impactful state law.
And moving west across the state, Manatee County offers another powerful and deeply concerning example of local governments struggling against the heavy hand of SB 180. The county had previously undertaken significant efforts to reinstate 50-foot wetland buffers, crucial environmental protections, and also repeal an ordinance that had allowed development beyond its future development area boundary.
These weren't arbitrary moves, right? They were voter-driven.
Not at all. They were strongly supported by voters who, in turn, had actually ousted several pro-development incumbents in recent elections. It signaled a clear shift in local priorities towards environmental protection, responsible growth. However, these crucial votes, designed to implement the will of the local electorate, were abruptly postponed. Why? Due to what Manatee County Commission Chairman George Cruz explicitly called threats from the state to remove elected officials for potentially violating SB 180.
Direct threats of removal.
Direct threats. Cruz, who's been a vocal opponent of the bill and was a direct recipient of these warnings, stated unequivocally that he actually received 2 letters from the state saying what they were intending to do was a violation of new state laws. This isn't just a legal debate, it feels like political intimidation. He made it clear, quote, "There is no intention of people from Tallahassee allowing us to fight in court. Everything is teeing up for the fact that they intend to just try to suspend people from office."
That's chilling.
It is. He also noted the profound democratic implications. If the governor were to replace a majority of the commission, it could upend that balance achieved by the newly elected officials, effectively overturning the will of the voters who put them there.
Undoing the election results, essentially.
Essentially. This immense pressure is why Manatee County is currently opting for a different strategy. They're joining a lobbying effort with Pasco County, Hillsborough, and Pinellas counties to push for a legislative fix. Specifically, they're aiming to limit SB 180's provisions to only hurricane-damaged property. Commissioner Carol Ann Feltz supported this, believing that any fix to Senate Bill 180 is a good fix. This whole struggle is deeply connected to ongoing local efforts to protect the Miaka River and its critical floodplain vital ecological resources now seemingly under threat because of this law.
And the groundswell of resistance we're observing, it's truly growing across Florida. It signals an impending, significant legal confrontation that could have statewide implications. Windermere, a community known for its, charm and local control, has become the latest city to sign on to a proposed lawsuit, indicating this broadening coalition. Leaders in Lake County and Maitland are also actively discussing joining this collective legal effort. Attorney Jamie Allen Cole, who is leading this statewide coalition of municipalities, he plans to formally file the lawsuit in early September. That's going to mark a major turning point in this battle.
So very soon.
Very soon. And the sentiment driving this collective action was powerfully articulated by Fort Lauderdale attorney Susan Trevethan. After carefully reviewing the detailed provisions of SB 180, she realized with stark, undeniable clarity, quote, "Everyone in the whole state of Florida just lost all their zoning power for the next 3 years."
That's a profound statement.
A profound statement on the erosion of local control. She believes, and this is a critical point for our listeners, that if local governments don't object to this, they will lose the power to object to anything else. She's highlighting the absolutely critical nature of this stand for the future of local control, for the principle of home rule, that bedrock principle of local self-governance across all of Florida. This isn't just about this one bill. It's about setting a precedent for state overreach.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the political and financial landscape in Florida? And let's ask the big question. Who truly stands to benefit from this sweeping legislation? Our sources point to some very strong, often highly critical opinions about the true beneficiaries. The Flagler Live article, for instance, makes a direct and, frankly, scathing accusation. It states that Tallahassee is tightly controlled by campaign donors who don't care about what's best for Florida's people, only what boosts their private profits. It further asserts that this alleged influence is precisely the reason they want to, quote, handcuff the local officials who might object to unchecked development.
Drawing a direct line between donors and the law.
A very direct line. The article then explicitly attributes the poison part of SB 180, those controversial land use restrictions, to Pat Neal, described as a former legislator who's built 25,000 homes in Florida and is now a billionaire, as well as a couple of Central Florida developers. Deltona Commissioner Dori Howington's observation resonates deeply with this sentiment. Remember, she said, the developers knew this law was coming. They were waiting for it.
Implying coordination.
It implies a coordinated effort, suggesting that legislative action was anticipated and perhaps, as these sources allege, shaped by these powerful interests.
And Larry Arnold's Facebook post further elaborates on this. He makes a very direct assertion about the intent behind the legislation. He argues that the specific language added to SB 180 is, quote, an attempt by the development community to regain control in Manatee County and to prevent Manatee's election success from being replicated in Florida's other 66 counties and their cities. He emphasizes this comes particularly after developer-funded candidates were kicked to the curb in Manatee County's primary, highlighting a perceived frustration among developers with recent local election outcomes.
So, a pushback against local voters.
That's the argument being made. Now, it's incredibly important for us to note these are direct opinions and accusations from the source material. They reflect deep public anger and concern. We've also seen the strong, often heated sentiments echoed in the comments section of that Flagler Live article. Readers used phrases like corrupt, realtor-contractor developers, cartel, Joe P. terrorism, and even called for removing every legislator from public office who voted yes on this bill and Governor DeSantis for signing it.
Very strong language.
Extremely strong language from citizens expressing profound anger and concern about the perceived influence of special interests on their elected officials. There's a feeling that their votes, their local democratic processes, are being undermined.
And when we connect this to the bigger picture, the stakes for local elected officials are incredibly high. It extends far beyond just legal challenges. There's the very real, immediate possibility of removal from office. Manatee County Commissioner George Cruz's experience is a stark, alarming illustration. He directly recounted receiving 2 letters from the state saying what they were intending to do was a violation of new state laws. Based on this, Cruz firmly believes, quote, there is no intention of people from Tallahassee allowing us to fight in court. Everything is teeing up for the fact that they intend to just try to suspend people from office for doing it.
Not just fines, but suspension.
Suspension. This isn't just a threat. It seems like a direct message designed to intimidate. We've also seen reports of alleged threats made to elected officials in other cities, Key West, Fort Myers, Orange County, for actions thought to conflict with SB 180. The process for this is clear and highly impactful. The governor has the power to appoint temporary replacements for suspended officials. The decision to permanently remove them would then go before the Senate in January.
Which could fundamentally change the makeup of a commission.
Exactly. It creates a very real and immediate threat, as Cruz pointed out, that such suspensions could upend that balance on local commissions. It could potentially undo the very changes that voters elected those officials to implement, effectively overturning the democratic will of the local electorate. This feels like a direct assault on local governance and the principle of elected representation.
And the cost of this resistance, Host? It also poses a significant, often crippling financial burden on local governments, and by extension, on their taxpayers. Consider Deltona's lawsuit again, that cost structure. $10,000 for trial, $5,000 for district appeal, $5,000 for the Supreme Court. That's $20,000 potentially. Not insignificant sums for a city's budget.
Especially a smaller city.
Especially. Furthermore, if a local government is unsuccessful in defending against a challenge under SB 180, remember that poison pill provision, the law firm WSHC plus B notes, they could face up to $250,000 in legal fees.
That $250,000 penalty again, a huge risk.
A huge risk. It's a substantial financial disincentive, forcing them to weigh the costs of defense against the needs of their community. Flagler Live columnist Craig Pittman sarcastically suggested that if local governments win their lawsuits, they should send all of their legal bills to the governor's mansion for payment. It's a pointed jab, implicitly critiquing the state's role in creating these, quote, wasteful expenses for taxpayers.
Highlighting the paradox, right. Taxpayers footing the bill for both sides.
Exactly. It highlights this clear, deeply frustrating paradox. Taxpayers ultimately paying for both sides of these lawsuits between local and state government. It's a situation many find deeply inefficient, unjust, and indicative of a system perhaps designed to benefit specific interests rather than the public good.
And beyond the financial strains, beyond the threats to elected officials, Larry Arnold further argues that SB 180 is also in contradiction with the provisions of Florida statutes, Chapter 163. Now, this isn't just a minor legal quibble, it's profoundly significant. Chapter 163 is essentially the bedrock of local government planning in Florida. It's the foundational law.
It lays out the rules for planning and zoning.
Precisely. It outlines comprehensive details for growth policy, county and municipal planning, the precise framework for land development regulations. SB 180's broad provisions, by widely preempting local control over these very areas, the core of what Chapter 163 defines, appear to directly dismantle the established, decades-old framework that Florida communities rely on for orderly growth, responsible development, crucial disaster preparedness. It's a fundamental conflict that could unravel years of established legal precedent.
And the potential legal challenges might not stop at state law, Host. Larry Arnold also thoughtfully mentions the possibility of legal protections under obstruction of rights provisions of the United States Constitution and federal law. Specifically, he cites 18 U.S.C. 242 and 42 U.S.C. 1985.
Okay, what are those about briefly?
Well, basically, these federal statutes are designed to protect individuals from deprivations of rights under color of law and conspiracies to interfere with civil rights, respectively. This suggests that some of these local governments, these coalitions they're forming, could be gearing up for a much deeper, more profound legal and constitutional battle. They might aim to protect the fundamental rights of citizens to self-governance, to the democratic process, against what they perceive as egregious state overreach.
So potentially taking it to the federal level.
It could escalate the conflict from a local zoning issue to a constitutional fight for civil liberties.
This legislation, it really does strike at the core of what many cherish as home rule. That fundamental ability of local communities to govern themselves, make decisions that directly reflect their unique needs, their values, their local character. What then are the broader implications for you, the citizen, when such significant power is increasingly centralized, pulled away to Tallahassee? Kim Dinkins of 1,000 Friends of Florida articulated a key concern that resonates deeply. She said SB 180 allows a popular vote to be overturned. We saw this clearly, painfully, with Orange County's Vision 2050. A supermajority, 73% of voters, approved a rural boundary only for it to be declared null and void ab initio by the state. Their democratic decision just erased.
It's a powerful example of the disconnect.
It really is. There's a strong, undeniable sentiment emerging among local leaders, among residents, that local governments are, quote, tired of being pushed around by developers and their toadies, as Flagler Live starkly put it. Larry Arnold emphasized this crucial point. He asserted that citizen votes, citizen participation in local elections, in meticulous planning processes, they should not be undermined by special interests and legislative end-arounds in the final, often rushed, hours of a legislative session. This legislation, therefore, isn't just about land use permits or building codes. It's about the very foundation of local democratic processes, the integrity of citizen participation, and frankly, the power of the ballot box.
In this profound shift in power, it raises another important question, host. Beyond the immediate legal and political battles, what are the long-term, perhaps unforeseen consequences of SB 180? Consequences for Florida's communities, its overall resilience, especially facing escalating environmental challenges.
Right, what are the practical effects down the road?
Well, one major immediate concern is the potential for inconsistent, possibly less safe, building standards across the state. Even in areas prone to similar disaster risks, if local governments can't enact more stringent, localized regulations, maybe updated codes based on recent storm experiences, it could jeopardize safety. It could increase future damage, hinder effective recovery in the long run. Also, the removal of cumulative substantial improvement, substantial damage tracking, or SISD tracking.
Explain that one quickly.
Sure, it's a crucial tool. It helps assess long-term flood risk by basically adding up repair costs over time. It identifies structures that really need elevation or other mitigation measures. Taking that away could significantly complicate efforts to manage long-term risk mitigation, as the Forerunner source noted. It makes it harder for communities to see and address their vulnerability over time.
So blinding them to future risk, in a way.
In a way, yes. And critically, without the ability for local governments to protect vital environmental features like wetland buffers, remember Manatee County struggling with that this could worsen flooding issues after disasters. It undermines natural defenses, potentially costing taxpayers much more down the line. The overarching concern, echoed by sources like Flagler Live, is the potential for developers to exploit what many see as a loophole in the law, leading to uncontrolled development that disregards local environmental sensitivities, infrastructure capacity, the genuine needs of the community, all while increasing future risks.
So as we look ahead, there's this clear split in strategy emerging among local governments trying to deal with SB 180's impact. Some, like Volusia and Manatee Counties, they're choosing a legislative path. They're focusing on lobbying, hoping for amendments, holding out hope for a fix in the next session of the legislature. They seem to believe a legislative solution is the most practical way forward, even if it's fraught with political uncertainties.
The lobbying route.
The lobbying route. Others, though, Deltona, Orange County, Edgewater, Windermere, they're actively pursuing immediate legal challenges. They argue, quite powerfully, they simply can't wait a year for Tallahassee to maybe act, given the immediate damaging consequences of the bill right now.
Two very different approaches.
Very different. Now, Senator Daisley, the bill's sponsor, has stated he's open to at least reopening the discussion and will not hesitate to do that if there's an opportunity to improve current law. That offers a sliver of hope, maybe, for legislative correction. However, there's a more cynical view, forcefully expressed by Flagler Live. They suggest that local governments don't want to gamble on Nile and other developers influencing our elected officials to do their bidding.
Ouch. Reflects deep distrust.
It reflects a deep, pervasive distrust among some local officials and citizens regarding the legislative process and the perceived outsized influence of powerful development interests.
Now, while these controversial provisions, local control, development restrictions, the poison pills, have rightly captured much of our attention, dominated headlines, it's also important to acknowledge that SB 180, which was presented as this comprehensive update to emergency management, it does introduce several other provisions aimed at genuinely improving emergency preparedness and response.
Okay, so it's not all bad, depending on your perspective.
Well, it highlights the complex, multifaceted nature of the bill. You have beneficial elements intertwined with these highly contentious ones. For instance, the bill enhances tenant rights during emergencies, offering clearer guidelines for renters during crises. That's potentially helpful. It mandates annual stormwater infrastructure accountability inspections for certain communities, crucial for maintaining drainage systems. It establishes new public information requirements for cities and counties, things like centralized FAQs, emergency supply lists, flood zone maps, ensuring residents have critical info available.
Better communication, potentially.
Potentially, yes. It also explicitly improves shelter equity and access, especially for people with disabilities and veterans, an often overlooked area. It provides automatic permit and development extensions during declared emergencies, which can offer practical relief for some. And finally, it strengthens emergency contracts and fiscal transparency, requiring public posting of contracts, annual spending reports, and mandates interagency coordination through designated officers and a new hazard mitigation group.
So some actual emergency management updates in there.
Yes. These less controversial but still crucial updates, highlighted by sources like Forerunner, they collectively seek to, quote, redefine the expectations of local governments and the public in disaster management. Now, meeting these new obligations, that will require significant proactive adaptation, thoughtful system design, substantial investment in communication infrastructure, content management from communities all across Florida. So it's a real mixed bag. Some elements seem genuinely helpful, while others fundamentally alter local governance.
So, as Florida communities navigate not only hurricane season, but also these ongoing legal and political storms surrounding SB 180, the question for you, our listener, really is this. In the face of increasing challenges from natural disasters, from escalating development pressures, who truly has the final, definitive say in shaping your community's future? Is it local voters and their elected officials, the people who understand the unique needs of their towns? Or is it legislative actions from afar, actions often influenced, as our sources suggest, by powerful outside interests and campaign donors?
And maybe consider this. When knowledge is power, when critical thinking is essential, what active role do you play? What role do you play in ensuring that the decisions impacting your local environment, your quality of life, are truly informed, transparent, and reflective of genuine community needs and democratic processes, rather than being dictated by external pressures or, vague legislative mandates handed down from the state capitol? Something to think about.